Welcome to Highline Excel 2016 class video number 1. Hey, if you want to download this Excel workbook, Business 218 Week 1, and follow along, click on the link below the video. Hey, this is exciting. This is Highline's full Excel class, and we are using Professional 2016 version. This is our first video. We will cover Excel fundamentals. Here is a list of our topics for this video. But before we look at these topics, let's go over to the sheet 218 Prereq. Now, this is for a Highline class, Business 218, which is called Spreadsheet Construction. We will cover Excel 2016 Professional from beginning to end, and we will learn how to make calculations and perform data analysis. In essence, we will learn all about Excel 2016. Now, the prerequisite for this class is the Highline class Business 216, or you can watch the videos from this Highline class at this YouTube playlist. Now, you must have one of these versions, either Excel 2016 Standalone, Office 2016 Professional, or Office 365 Professional Plus, or they actually call it Pro Plus. Now, I have links here to each one of these. The standalone, that's if you want to buy just the single Excel. Office Professional, that has the full suite. Or you can get Office 365 Professional Plus or Pro Plus. And the 365 just means that this version will be updated regularly. And since Office 2016 came out in September 2016, they've already added some cool new functions and features. So if you want the best version, get the 365 version. Now, when you get that version, you're going to have to be sure, and I'll remind you this later when we get to the topics on Power Pivot and Data Model. But you want to make sure and go to File, Options. Down here in Add-ins, you want to select COM Add-in Go, and be sure and select Power Pivot for Excel. Once you do that, then you'll have this ribbon tab that we'll get to talk about later. One other amazing new thing in Excel 2016 on the Data ribbon tab, there it is, Get and Transform. In earlier versions, we had to download and install something called Power Query. This, Get and Transform, is Power Query, and we'll get to learn about that amazing new 2016 feature. Now, let's go over and look at our topics. This video, video number 1, we're going to go over how we're going to do things in this class, what types of things we're going to do in this class, and then we're going to talk about data, data sets, formatting, including the ever-important number formatting. Now, let's go over to the sheet E and E, because the goal of this class is to develop effective and efficient solutions in Excel for making calculations and performing data analysis. Now, in order to understand what this is, we're going to define effective and efficient. So effective just means, hey, accomplish the stated goal. Efficient means accomplish the goal with the minimum number of resources and have the accomplished goal have the ability to adapt to future changes. So every solution we make in Excel, we will learn how to do it efficiently and effectively. Now, effectively is pretty much, did we get the right answer, right? So if our goal is to count the number of Fords from over here, well, that is not an effective solution because I can count, looks like there's 2 Fords. And if I put this formula in edit mode, it was simple mistake, right? We didn't highlight the whole column, but that is not an effective solution. The effective solution, of course, is highlight the full column. Another example of effective, if our goal is to calculate the deduction at a 7.65 tax rate, notice this formula, round gross times tax rate, rounding to the penny, and this one both give us the correct answer. So this is effective. But that right there has 2 decimals hidden. That is not an effective solution. When I look here, I should be able to visually see exactly what the tax rate is. This is a simple fix. I can simply come up to the Home ribbon tab and increase the decimal. But that is an example. Not effective based on number formatting, not effective based on building an incorrect formula. Now let's scroll down and talk about efficient. Remember, efficient is accomplish the goal with a minimum number of resources and have the accomplished goal have the ability to adapt to future changes. Example 1, if our goal is to count the number of cars that each sales rep sold, well, if I'm looking over here at Joe, so Joe sold a Ford, and a Toyota. So over here, all three, 1, 2, 3 solutions show the effective answer, the correct answer. Joe sold 2 Fords, 0 Hondas, and 1 Toyota. But this is not efficient. Typing criteria into a formula. This actually violates Excel's golden rule, which says anytime a formula input can change, you put it into a cell and refer to it with a cell reference. But look at this. This person had to type all of this in. That takes a long time. If our resource is time to create a solution, this is not an efficient solution. This also is not efficient. This person forgot to lock the ranges here. Both of these, look at this. Every one of these formulas had to be typed out individually. Not efficient. It takes us a long time to create this solution. Whereas over here, F2, we have the ranges locked, so we can copy it down and over for both of the ranges. And we've referred to our criteria or conditions with cell references. This one formula can be copied down and over, and it works in all cells. That is an efficient solution. Let's look at example number 2. If our goal is to calculate the deduction at 7.65%, well, this formula is effective. It gives us the right answer. And it's efficient. This one is not. Not only does this violate Excel's golden rule, that number is a number that changes, so we should put it into a cell and refer to it with the cell reference. The problem with a spreadsheet filled with, and this is called a hard-coded value, but if you have a spreadsheet with hard-coded values, it's just too hard to change and update the solution later. I can see this on the face of the spreadsheet, which is easy for me to understand, but even better if I need to change it, I simply type 8.75, and instantly that updates. This does not. Now I'm going to Control Z. This setup here has the ability to easily update when things change later. Another example of not efficient. That formula is not efficient. It's adding this column. This one is. Now this one takes too long to create. This one much faster. But also, this will not adapt to future changes. So if I were to insert a row, right-click Insert, and watch this. I'm just going to type the number 1. I haven't hit Enter yet. Watch these two formulas. When I hit Enter, that one, of course, is efficient. It's allowing us to change the structure of the spreadsheet, and it totally updates. That one has no idea that I just updated by inserting a row. Escape, and now I'm going to Control Z, Z. Now let's go look at our third example, and I'm going to scroll over here. We're talking about efficient. Our goal is to add this column. This is what I don't want to do. I don't want to type SUM, open parentheses, and then highlight the entire column. Wow, that took a long time. And then I'm going to scroll up, and then I'm going to put close parentheses and Enter. Yes, it's effective. It gets me the right answer, but it's not efficient. I'm going to use keyboards because keyboards are fast. If we're building a solution here, total that column, I use the keyboard Alt equals to open up AutoSum. I click in the top cell. To highlight all the way down to the bottom, I use Control, Shift, and down arrow. And now to jump back to the active cell, I use Control, backspace. That is efficient. I hit Enter, efficient, and effective. So all the solutions we build in this class will be efficient and effective. Now we want to go over to the next sheet and talk about the 2 things that Excel does. I'm going to the sheet What Excel Does. It's very simple. Broadly speaking, right, Excel makes calculations like calculating a tax rate or a deduction and does data analysis, converting raw data into useful information. Here are examples of calculations. And notice this formula, F2, calculates the deduction. 2 cells multiplied together and round it. That is a numeric calculation or a number formula. Excel can also make calculations F2, a logical formula. I'm asking the question with this formula. Is Merrill over the maximum call limit? That is a logical formula that delivers a true or a false. If I change this to 12, that logical formula only has two possible answers. Control Z. Down here, we have a formula that's joining first and last name. So when I hit F2, that is an example of a text calculation or a text formula. We're joining one cell, a space, and another cell using the join operator, the ampersand. Those are examples of calculations. Examples of data analysis, and the definition of data analysis is very simple. Convert raw data into useful information for decision makers. We will have a proper data set with records in rows and field names at the top, and either with a pivot table or with formulas, we can go from all of the raw data into some useful information that will help us, in this case, determine the amount that each sales rep sold for each product. Raw data into useful information for decision makers. Those are the two things that Excel does, and we will spend the whole quarter making calculations and performing data analysis in an effective and efficient way. Now let's go over to the sheet structure. Just to remind you, in Excel there are columns and rows. Columns are letters, rows are numbers. The intersection is a cell. In this case, it's B8. All of the cells make up the worksheet or simply sheet. Down here we have sheet tabs. Each one of those tells us the name of this sheet. All of the sheets together create our workbook. That workbook has a file name, and it is up here. Now, two things about these sheets. We can actually use keyboards, Control Page Down or Control Page Up. So I'm on structure. If I use Control Page Down, I'm moving to the right. If I use Control Page Up, I move through each sheet, moving to the left. Now, one totally awesome trick in these huge workbooks with lots of sheet tabs is we come over to the arrows, and this moves the sheets, but not the active sheet, just exposes more sheets down here. But watch this. I can right-click those scroll arrows. I right-clicked, and instantly a huge list of all of my sheets come up, and I can click on any one and jump to any one of these. If I go to Custom Number Format Notes, click OK, instantly I'm on the sheet Custom Format Notes. Right-click, jump back to Structure, and click OK. All right, I'm going to use my scroll arrows to expose more but not move the active sheet. Now, as we've already talked about when in terms of efficient Excel solution creation, keyboard sheet, we are definitely going to use keyboard shortcuts in this class. Alt equals, click in the top cell, Control Shift down arrow, Control backspace, and Enter. If I want to highlight this whole column, Control Shift down arrow, Control 1 to open up Format Cells. I can select Currency, 2 decimal symbol, my negative, and click OK. Or any highlighted button in the dialog box can be enacted with the Enter key. Now I can come down to the bottom, Alt equals, and Enter. There are some other important keyboards, but I do want to mention Alt keyboards. Now, we are going to use a few Alt keyboards in this class, but let me show you what's so amazing about Alt keyboards. Since there's not a keyboard shortcut like Control P for pivot table, normally if we wanted to make a pivot table, we have to go to Insert. In the Tables group, we have to click on Pivot Table to open up Create Pivot Table dialog box. Well, if this is something you do every single day or many times every week, Microsoft made Alt keyboards for everything in the ribbon tabs, and you can teach them to yourself. Now watch this. I'm seeing the Insert. In fact, I'm going to click on Home, and my goal is to get to Insert. Watch this. Hit the Alt key, and what happens? The screen tips pop up and tell you which key you have to hit to get to whichever ribbon. Now, these are succession keys, so I hit Alt and then let go. And now watch this. I'm going to hit N and let go. And now I can see there's a V. So V in succession, Alt N V. So I'm going to try it. Alt N V. That's how we will open Create Pivot Table dialog box. All right, so we'll use keyboards in this class. Now we're scrolling along here. We're going to talk about some terminology and what raw data is in Excel and data sets. But I want to first start by clicking on the Data Analysis Terms sheet. Now, data analysis and business intelligence terms, we're going to be using these terms throughout the quarter. Data analysis is defined as converting raw data into useful information for decision makers. Business intelligence, which has approximately the same definition but with a few extra words. Business intelligence is converting raw data into useful, actionable information, oftentimes in the form of a dashboard for decision makers in a business situation. So really, the difference between these two is the word actionable, and that just means you can act on the information to make some decision. Dashboards is just a final end user report, oftentimes with charts and tables. And I added for decision makers in a business situation because we're always going to be in the business context. So really, I see both of these terms, data analysis and business intelligence, as synonyms for each other. It really always is. How do we get useful information to make decisions or take actions based on the raw data? Now, raw data is defined as data in its smallest form that allows Excel data analysis features and Excel data analysis techniques to work. Now, it's not hard to understand raw data. Let's go over to the sheet Raw Data. Here we have a column with addresses. It would be very hard to sort by zip code or do a pivot table by zip code or extract using filter with zip code or city or state. Whereas when we take that raw data and break it into its smallest part, are features like sorting, filtering, pivot tables, and things like that, and formulas that do data analysis type actions work when we have data in its smallest bits. Now let's go back over to data analysis terms. We have raw data. The proper data set. None of our Excel data analysis features are going to work unless we have a proper data set. Also sometimes called a proper table format. And it simply means field names in the first row and records in subsequent rows. Let's go over to the sheet Excel proper data set. Now in Excel, there's one extra thing we have to be careful of. Field names in the first row. That means for any data set, we have to have a name at the top of the column that says what data goes in this column. Numbers for sales go here. Text items for sales rep go in this column. Not only is it so we put the data in the correct column, but later, like pivot tables, Power Query, there'll always be a field list listing each one of our field names. That way we can ask questions and query and do data analysis upon particular columns or combination of columns. Records in subsequent rows. Each one of these is a record, or in this case, a transaction. And in Excel, it's very important, number 3, we have empty cells or Excel row or column headers around the entire data set. Now here's Excel row headers, they're numbers. But notice the rest of the data set has empty cells. Now, if we had extra data over here that was like a note or a formula or a calculation, data analysis features like sort, filter, pivot tables, and Power Query may not work correctly. So Control Z, we're always going to leave those empty cells around our data set. Now, 2 things about a proper data set. This is a proper data set, and so is this. But notice this has a unique identifier or primary key in the first column. There are no duplicates. We are collecting bits of raw data for each transaction. In Business 216, when we studied Access the Database, we talked about primary keys and unique identifiers. If you're a student at Highline, your unique identifier is your student ID. That way, in the first column with student IDs, they will not mix up your grades with somebody else. So definitely, this is a proper data set. But look at this. This is also a proper data set. There is no unique identifier in the first column. There are definitely duplicates in the first column. Hey, for us in Excel, either type of proper data set, whether it has a unique identifier or not, will work. Now, in some cases, as we'll see later, when we're building relationships between tables, then it's going to become important that the lookup table has a unique identifier or primary key or no duplicates in the first column. All right, now let's go back over to data analysis term, raw data, proper data set. Well, that's the ingredient for us before we do our data analysis. But guess what? When we get the raw data sitting in our proper data set, sometimes we need to clean the raw data or transform the data sets. Now, cleaning the raw data means fix unusable raw data so that it can be used to perform data analysis. Examples: removing unwanted characters like extra spaces, add needed characters, split data apart, join data together, or other cleaning goals. So oftentimes we're going to have to clean our raw data in. As we mentioned at the beginning of the video, get and transform, also known as Power Query, is just brilliant for doing this. Also, transforming data sets. That means fix unusable data sets so that it can be used to perform data analysis. Examples: sometimes we need to filter out some of the data, combine multiple tables, merge, append, or unpivot data sets. We might have to add, remove, or filter columns in data sets. And there's other transformational goals we'll have also. So anytime we're talking about data analysis and business intelligence, we usually import the data, clean it, transform it. Then we have our raw data sitting in the proper data set. And actually, I put import data down here. This is usually, at least in Power Query, the get and transform feature we're going to use. We actually will connect to external data sources to import it. Then Power Query will allow us to clean it, transform it before it imports it into Excel. But importing data is very simple. We import data from external sources, and it can be a single table or multiple tables or sources, into either Excel or Power Pivot's data model, or also we'll see an example of Power BI Desktop, another data analysis business intelligence tool. All of this, there's all of our terms. That's what we're going to do for much of the quarter. And the goal of data analysis and business intelligence is always create useful, updatable, actionable information for decision makers. Now, before we go on to talk about number formatting, we want to talk about a couple more important aspects of data and tables in Excel. Now, I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to go to Excel data types. Now, Excel doesn't really have a real data type like we learned in Business 216 when we were doing Access databases. But there is a type of data type. And there are a few different data types. We can have text. So we have the word Excel here, or the word RAD, right? Notice that it's always going to be aligned to the left. That is the default alignment for text. As soon as we see something aligned to the left, we're going to assume that Excel considers it text. Now, there's no problem. You can do stuff like this. Actually, it is a problem. I'm going to Control-ZZ. We will never or very rarely use alignment because we lose the ability to see what type of data Excel thinks it is when we start applying alignment. The only time we'll apply alignment is on the finished reporting product, the useful information end of it. The other data type is numbers. Notice we could type a number like 12. It's always going to be aligned to the right. So that's our visual cue from the default alignment that Excel thinks these are numbers. We also have logical or Boolean values, true or false. They will always be centered and all caps. It doesn't matter if you type them in lowercase. When you hit Enter, it will always capitalize and be centered. Errors are something we have to deal with in Excel, and sometimes they are in data sets or a result of formulas. They're always going to be centered and capitalized. This one just means divide by 0. That's not allowed. Next video, we'll see some examples of errors. Another type of data that we're going to have to deal with in Excel, and it's not really data, it's an empty cell. So there's just nothing in there. And that can sometimes cause our data analysis or formula calculations to do funny things. So empty cells, we're going to consider a thing in Excel. So text, numbers, Booleans or logicals, errors, and empty cells. Now let's just look at why this is important. Notice I'm adding this column. It's working. The sum function knows what to do. There's our visual cue. It's to the right, so we know Excel thinks it's a number. We're assuming that there's none of this up here. Now what happened here? I'm using the same sum function, but since these numbers are considered text, the sum function is programmed to ignore them. And this happens sometimes when we import data from a database or copy and paste from a text file or something. Another use of this idea of data types and default alignment. If I type 15/2/2016 into Excel, when I hit enter, it's aligned to the left. Well, dates are supposed to be serial numbers, right? Well, there's no 15th month. So if I meant February 15th, I would have to change this. /15. Now watch this. When I hit enter, the default alignment says, OK, that's a legal date because it's aligned to the right. That means it's considered a number. Control-Z. As soon as I type that in and it's aligned to the left, that's your visual cue that something's wrong with our date. Same with time, 8:00, and I'm going to forget the space. That is immediately aligned to the left. We know Excel thinks it is text. As soon as I add the space, now I'm entering a legal time value. So when I hit enter, that alignment to the right tells me it is a number. Other examples are 20, and I accidentally type 2 decimals, right? And so that is immediately aligned to the left. That's my visual cue that I had an error in entering the values. If I get rid of it and hit enter, boom. Now, next we want to look at a common mistake. Here is some data and some formulas. And what they've done is they've used the alignment over here. And as soon as they do this, and again, centered is one of the more common alignment mistakes that I see. But as soon as you do that, you lose your visual cue for tracking down errors. I'm going to Control-Z. So what's happening here is that sum function is trying to add this, but there's some numbers over here that are considered text. Similarly, there's another number, Control-Y, which is undo the undo. That is centered and may be fine for printing, but we lose our ability to track down the errors with our visual cues. Control-Z. In general, if I have formulas or the source data is raw data for pivot tables or charts, I don't use the alignment. Now, it's certainly all right for the final product. Here's an example of some stocks and some statistics over here. And when you highlight this, you can see clearly we've used center. But this is something we're going to print out. It's easier to read this way. We're not going to use these numbers as any inputs for formulas, so that is fine. All right, so alignment is very important. Even though we don't have a proper data type like we do in a database like Access, here are the different types of data. And by the way, one last final note. If you remember back to our study of databases and Access, when we had a column, we were not allowed to have text and numbers in the same column. We had to define the whole column or field as a particular data type. Now, when we get to Power Query, Get and Transform, and Power Pivot, we do have the ability, some of the new features, to define a data type for a column. Now we want to go over to the sheet Excel table and talk about the amazing Excel table feature. Now we have a proper data set. And what we'd like is I'd like to have a formula here, just the sum function, adding all of these numbers up. But if I add any new records, I want the formula to update and include a total of any new records that I add or delete. The way we can do that in Excel is by converting this proper data set into an Excel table. Now, you click in a single cell in the table, and to get to the Excel table feature, you go Insert Tables, and right there. Now, we're not going to use the ribbon method. We're going to use that keyboard listed right there. And you can see it says Control-T. So you ready? Control T. Now, it's highlighted the correct fields and records because I have empty cells all the way around. Now the OK button is highlighted, so I simply hit Enter. Now I have a bunch of new aspects to this table. Now, before we look at them, I want to immediately notice that we're in the Table Tools Design ribbon tab that popped up when I converted this to a table. We always want to go over in Properties and name the table. Now, since I make tables all the time, as soon as I do Control T, Enter, I use the keyboard to name, which will jump my cursor up here. It's Alt JTA. And there you can see it's highlighted. I'm going to call this Product Sales. So PROD Sales and Enter to register that name. Now, a number of things happen. We get formatting. We get drop downs that have sorting and filtering. But the most amazing thing is that if we have a formula or a chart or a pivot table or Power Query or any of the other features that point to this, the ranges will update when we add new records. So let's go ahead and try this. Alt equals. Now watch what happens. Remember, we named the table, and this column is called Sales right here. So watch this. I'm going to click and drag. And as soon as I do that, it puts in what's called the table formula nomenclature. It's also called a structured reference. There's the name of the table, and the field name will always be in square brackets. If you remember back to Access, we had square brackets for our field names in Access Database. Now when I hit Enter, let's just come down here. Now, there's two ways you can add new records. One way is to simply click in the cell directly below the table. And I'm going to type 1/5/2015. And when I hit Tab, you could see the table automatically expanded to include that. The sale was 300. Now, before I hit Tab, look up here. Now, when I hit Tab, instantly it updates. It is now looking at that new number in this new record. This was a quad, and notice when I type a Q, it's got an autocomplete. Now, the other way to add records is, notice I'm in the last cell in the last record of the table. When I hit Tab, instantly it creates a new record. 1/6/2015 tab. 100 tab and try. Now, I'm not going to hit Tab because I don't want to add a new record. I'm going to hit Enter. Now, let's go up and hit F2 to put it in edit mode. And sure enough, that is an expandable range. Let's make a pivot table. I'm going to click in a single cell, Alt-NV, and I want to put it on this existing sheet. So I'm going to click Location. I'm going to click right over to the side and click OK. And just like that, we get our field list. There's our 1, 2, 3 fields. I'm going to drag the product name down to rows. And in a pivot table, when you do that instantly from the products column, it shows a unique list, one of each item. Now I drag sales down to values, and instantly, because it's a number I'm dropping down here, it will default to the sum calculation. Now I don't like row labels, so I immediately go up to Design, Report Layout, and Show in Tabular or Outline. I'm going to choose Tabular. Now I see the field name. I'm going to leave it that way without any number formatting, but here is another object pointing to this table. Now you ready? I'm going to click below the last record, type 1/7/2015 tab 500. Now watch what happens when I hit Tab. We already know the formula update, but this won't update yet. But let's do it. Tab, and then this was for Carlota, so I type a C. Autocomplete looks above and fills in Carlota, and now I hit Enter. Now, the sum function updated. But for pivot tables and later for Power Query and Power Pivot, we will have to refresh. I'm going to come over and right-click. And because I'm inside the pivot table, I see Refresh. When I click Refresh, instantly it updates. So Excel table feature, we will be using it a lot. Now I'm going to use my scroll arrows, and we're going to scroll over. And now we're going to talk about number formatting. We're going to click on the sheet, Number Formatting. Now we want to look at a couple examples and then talk about what number formatting really is. here we have some sales numbers. And up in the home ribbon, in the number group, there's a drop down that's pretty convenient. We can select, in this case, either currency or accounting. I'm going to select currency, but notice down here, there's a bunch of decimals, and some numbers don't have any decimals. So as soon as I click currency, what happened? Where did those dollar signs come from? Where did that decimal and 00 come from? Well, let's click in this cell, and on the surface of the spreadsheet, I see how many characters? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But look up into the formula bar. What is really in the cell is simply two characters, a 5 and a 0. So there can be a disconnect between the surface of the cells and what we see and the number that lies in the cell underneath the number formatting. Now look down here. I'm going to click on this. It looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters in the cell. But look it up here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 characters in the cell. Now, in this case, if we were never going to add this column, it's OK to display the number to look as if it's rounded. It is not rounded. That number, 5726, is not actually the number in the cell. And if we added them, it would not be adding 57.26. It would be adding all of those extraneous decimals. And we'll talk about what to do if we need to round later. In our prerequisite class, you learned all about the round function, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Now, here's another example. What about over here? 25 plus 50 plus 10 plus 15. Well, of course, it's 100. But in Excel, we get to do magic. 25, 50, 10, and 15, the exact same numbers. Hey, we get to make it equal 99. There is no way, as soon as you see this situation, you have to suspect number formatting. Now, I'm going to highlight all these numbers, and the eraser for number formatting is we go up to number, and there's the drop-down general number formatting. General number formatting will wipe away any number format applied and show you what really sits in the cell. Now, I'm going to click on that general. And sure enough, over here, there were some decimals, and all we did was decrease the decimals. So when I come up and go decrease decimals, boop, boop, that is a number formatting that displays fewer decimals. If I were to click on this 50, it's not really 50, it's 4950. Formulas will not look at number formatting. They always will look at the underlying number. So sum is functioning on whatever numbers there are plus the decimals. Over here, same thing. It just happens to be that the numbers are displayed as they also sit in the cell. So our conclusions about number formatting. Number formatting can display numbers on the surface of the cells that can be different than the underlying numbers that sit in the cell. Right here, we're displaying the numbers exactly as they sit in the cell. Over here, we're displaying the number differently than it sits in the cell. Our second conclusion for number formatting, formulas make their calculations on the actual numbers in the cells, not the numbers that are displayed on the surface of the cell. So that sum function is looking underneath that number formatting and adding all of the numbers, including all the decimals. Remember, you can think of it this way. Number formatting is a facade. A facade just means something on the surface, like your house is painted beautifully, but on the inside it's messy. At Halloween, you might be super sweet, wonderful person inside, but you might have a Halloween witch or zombie mask on the surface, which is different than the inside. Remember, what you see is not always what is in the cell. Another important example of number formatting, and we're going to learn the keyboard for today's date. If you're ever entering transactional data and you're entering stuff for today's date, it's control semicolon. So control semicolon, and boom, it puts 4/5/2016 right in the cell. Now, actually, watch this. I'm going to click Escape because notice the number formatting is general before I do anything. In fact, general is the default for all cells when you open up an Excel workbook, unless they've been altered, of course. All right, so you ready? Control semicolon. As soon as and I'm going to use Control Enter because I want to put that thing in the cell and keep the cell selected. So ready, Control Enter. Wow, look at that. So when I enter today's date, whether using a keyboard or typing it out, it'll always apply the date number formatting. Now I'm going to come down here, Control semicolon, Control Enter, and now instead of going up and applying general to see really what is in the cell like this, I'm going to use the keyboard. It's Control Shift, either tilde or grave accent. This key is to the left of the standard number 1 key. So you ready? Control Shift, grave accent, tilde. What? 42,465 sits under April 5th, 2016? Yeah, and you all know this from your prerequisite class. That is the number of days since December 31st, 1899. And why is it? Well, it's so we can do date math. Now, before we do some examples of date math, if I have the number 1, 2, or 41,521, these are the actual dates if we were to apply date number formatting. Now, just a second ago, we did a date and then did general to erase it, but you could do the reverse to prove it. These numbers, if we apply date number formatting, and I'm going to use the short date, boom, there it is, Control Z. What this means is under every date is a number that we can do date math. Remember, if this is 8/26/2013 and this is 8/21, this date is further through history, which means the serial number underneath is bigger. So we're allowed to calculate the number of days an invoice is late equals the larger date minus the earlier date. And when I hit Enter, it tells me 5 days. Now, the reason, and I'm going to highlight Control Shift tilde to look at the underlying serial number date, the number of days since December 31st, 1899. Of course, bigger number minus smaller number, there's exactly 5 between the two. Now, Control Z, when you're doing invoices, of course, when I take 26 minus 21, the 21, which is the first date, is subtracted. That 21 is not included, and that is the way standard invoicing works. Now, if we have a different situation, project start date and project end date, if we want to figure out how many days total for the project, equals, and watch this, I'm going to use my arrow keys to get the cell references. And then I'm going to type subtraction and arrow, arrow to get that other cell reference. The rule is if your cell references are close in, instead of using your mouse to get them, you should use your arrow keys. Now, that won't give me the correct day because the 21st will not be included. So anytime you have the first day included, you have to add 1 back in. Control Enter, and so total days for the project is 6. Another great use, and look at this, I had this left in there. I didn't want to have it like that. If we have the loan issue date, 2/20/2016, and the loan is outstanding for 10 days, I can do date math. I can take the serial number date that sits underneath that date number formatting and just add a regular old number. And so now if I took the loan out on the 20th, I add 10 days, Control Enter. That is not number of days. That is called the maturity date. That is the date that I must pay back this loan. So date math, number formatting, incredibly important in Excel. Now let's go look at another example, and this we did in our prerequisite class. Also, anytime you type a time, so if I come over here and type 8:00 and I forget the space, we talked about this earlier, that is text aligned to the left. But if I include the space, Excel knows that this should be a number. And by the way, look, I haven't entered this number as a time yet, so it's still general. But when I Control Enter, time number formatting, custom time number formatting is applied. That number is aligned to the right. It is a time value. Now, time values represent the proportion of one 24-hour day. So underneath 8 a.m. is 8 divided by 24. Now, if I apply general, Control Shift tilde grave accent, sure enough, 8 divided by 24 is 1/3 or 0.33333. Control Z. So all times are going to be whatever the time is divided by 24. Now, this is important to know. Number formatting, underline number, because if we go to create a formula, remember formulas act on the underlying numbers, not the number formatting. So if I were to take equals the later time minus the earlier time, Control Enter, it will add that custom time number formatting. It looks like it's right, right? 3.5 hours. But if I have a formula over here that says, hey, 25 bucks times 3.5 hours, that should be something like 82.50 or something. This person's going to be totally unhappy. $3.65 for 3.5 hours. Well, we're going to wipe away the number formatting to see what's underneath. Control Shift tilde or grave accent. Of course, 3.5 hours divided by 24 is exactly that decimal. So anytime you are doing time math and you want the actual number of hours, we force subtraction to happen first. Remember our order of operations, right? By parentheses. And we multiply times 24. Now, 24 is an example of a number that will never change, so we can just type it right into our formula. And instantly I get, hey, 3.5 hours. And, oh, I can't do math in my head. I said 82.50. It's 87.50. So number formatting is a facade. This is yet another important example. Our formulas act on the underlying numbers. So in this case, we had to know that and create a formula that respect the underlying number. All right, other examples of number formatting. But first, I want to ask the question, what is a percentage? Now, all of you should know what a percentage is. There's the prerequisite class, Business 216. Also, if you had Business Math, Business 135. But a percentage is simply a way of displaying parts out of 100. So I always think of it this way. Let's think of tax. If the tax rate is 9.95, I think that's the tax rate in Seattle. So I'm going to say, hey, for every $1, I have to pay 9.95 pennies. Now, how many pennies are in $1? 100. So the question is, how many parts out of 100 are we required to pay? Well, it's simple division. I say 9.95 divided by 100. And so what I get is a decimal, and that is 0.0995. Now, sometimes it's hard to quickly see and understand a decimal, right? Especially in terms of the tax rate. So we can display this underlying number as a percentage. Now, here's what it does, and we learned this in many other classes. But when you apply percentage number format, even when you were taught how to do it by hand, remember you had to take the decimal and slide it, whoop, whoop, 2 positions to the right. So the decimal should be right after that first 9. Then we add a percentage symbol. That is the process to display the underlying number as a percentage. Hey, I'm just going to go up and I am not going to use that button right there. That button, when I click it, sure, it adds a percentage, but it displays no decimals. That is a huge source of errors for people who don't know about number formatting. Now I'm going to Control Z. For us, it would have been easy. We could have just increased the decimals. But since oftentimes we're dealing with 2 decimals for a percentage, the built-in and the number group drop-down is percentage. And it will always, if you click this, show percentages with 2 decimals. And sure enough, that number formatting displaying on the surface of the spreadsheet or the cells is displaying the decimal whoop, whoop, and added a percent symbol. Now, many times you will get a number like this. It is perfectly all right in all of your calculations for budgets and taxes and invoice and payroll to leave it like that. But if you want to apply percentage number formatting, no problem. We simply go up and use that if you want to. Or we can Control-1 to open up Format Cells. And the percentage number formatting is one of the options here. And sure enough, we can change the decimals. I'm going to leave it as 2. There's OK. I'm going to hit Enter to enact that highlighted button. Now, I want to specifically look at a number of important examples for percentages. Oftentimes, you see the number 0.03 in the cell, or maybe you even type it in because you know the tax rate is 3%. So you type that in, and then you come up and you apply the number formatting. So there it is. The big mistake, and this is one of the more common mistakes throughout all of Excel history, the person doesn't know about number formatting, so they type a 3, fully expecting when I go up and apply number formatting that I'm going to get 3%. But no way. That number formatting obeyed you. Control Z. It took the decimal, which is after the 3, and went whoop, whoop, slid it 2 positions to the right, and added the number symbol. So we don't want to do that. If you're going to type the number in first, type 0.03. Now, there is a way to avoid that if you pre-format your cells. And I'm going to go up and apply. And notice we don't have a preview here, but it will always, from this drop-down, apply 2 decimals. Now watch this. If I can see it's pre-formatted. If I type a 3, boop, that percentage symbol pops up. It means that the cell has been pre-formatted. Now I'm typing what looks like an integer or a whole number 3. But when I enter that, underneath is 0.03, and it's properly displayed as 3%. So I pre-formatted. I'm totally allowed to type a 3. You're also allowed, and I can see the pre-formatting, to type 0.03. And when you hit Enter, that will work also. Now, in either case, when I typed a 3 or 0.03, because percentage number formatting was applied, if I Control-Shift grave accent tilde to look at what's under the number formatting, they both have 3 parts out of 100. Control-Z. A couple other things. You can format as you type. So if you want 4.5%, right now if I enter it, it is 4.5. Whole number 4.5 decimal. But if I type a percentage symbol, and you can look up here, I haven't hit Enter. So it was general number formatting, but I've typed a percentage symbol. So when I Control-Enter, I'm telling Excel to format this as a percentage as I type. I can see clearly this is a percentage. Underneath that number is 0.045. One other important aspect, and we already saw this. This is one of the most common errors in Excel. Somebody has a proper decimal for a tax rate or budget or whatever it might be, and they come up and they use this button here. Boom. If they don't know about number formatting as a facade, they're totally tricked. They think it converted their number to 3%. Of course, if I look at 100 times 3%, I should get $3. But that formula is not going to look at that number formatting. Totally going to look underneath at that 0.025. I could clearly fix that by simply clicking the increase decimal. That's how we want to leave it. Remember, as we talked about earlier in the video, effective and efficient solutions. We do not leave something that will confuse the user of the spreadsheet. If it's 2.5, we want to leave it 2.5. Hey, we talked a lot about number formatting. Most of this is review, but guess what? We're going to talk about something new that has to do with number formatting. We're going to click on the sheet CNF, and CNF stands for Custom Number Formatting. That just means instead of using one of the built-in categories for number formatting, either from this drop-down or Control-1 on the Number tab from this list of categories, we can create our own custom number formatting as long as we type the code in. Now, I have a whole sheet with notes over here with all the code. But at this juncture in the class, we're just going to look at date, time, decimals, and percentage number formatting. And we're going to start with the easiest number formatting to learn, which is the number formatting for dates. Now, when we get to typing out our code, it's easy. M means month, D is day, and Y is year. Now, let's just go learn a good trick to teach ourselves about custom number formatting. There's already a date number formatting applied on this cell. If I Control-1, I can see on the Number tab, Date, I've selected this top one. And by the way, there's a bunch of subcategories here. You can pick whichever one you'd like. And notice up at the top, there's a preview. But we're going to select this one. And if we want to know what the custom number formatting is for whatever built-in category, we just simply go down to Custom. And in the Type text box, there it is. It's simple. M/D/YYY. Now I'm going to click Escape, and we're going to click on the cell below, and now we're going to try this for ourselves. Control-1. We come over to Number, down to Custom, and in the Type text box, we simply highlight and watch this. This is always going to give us a sample or a preview. I'm going to delete this. And sure enough, if there's no custom number formatting, it shows us the underlying serial number. Now let's have a little fun. Let's type M. Wow. Even though the serial number is in the cell, if I type a single M, it'll just show me the number for the month. Type another M and a third M. Wow, it shows us the 3-letter abbreviation for month. I type a fourth M, and no way, it'll display the entire month name. Now let's backspace. If I type a D, just the day. Now, 2 Ds shows us a leading 0, and that will work for month also. 3 Ds gives us the abbreviation, and 4 Ds gives us the full day name. Let's backspace. If I type just a Y, it shows me 2-digit abbreviation for year. If I type 3, it gives me the full year, or 4. Now, what I want to do is simply in this cell right here, display just the day. So I'm going to type DDDD. That is our first custom number formatting. We are displaying a serial number to show just Thursday. So when I click OK, it displays on the surface of the spreadsheet Thursday. Underneath, yes, there is a date, and under that, there is the serial number. Why would you ever want to do that? Maybe you're making a schedule or a calendar, and you want to display the day name. Also, later in the class, we'll see that it's important sometimes to figure out how many events happen on a particular day, and custom number formatting will help us figure that out from a serial number, what day it is. Now let's try a different one. Click in the cell below, Control-1, come down to Custom. And in the type, I want to show the entire day, so I put 4 Ds, and I'm allowed to type a comma and a space. And now I want the abbreviation for month, so 3 M's, space, the day, so a single D, comma, space, and then YYY. And you can combine this however you want to get your own custom number formatting. So when I click OK, it is displayed as if there is text for Thursday and November, but really underneath there's that serial number. Now, time, H is for hour, M is for minute, S is for second, separated by a semicolon. So here I'm going to Control-1 and look at what the custom number formatting is. An H, a colon, an MM, and an AM, PM. If I were to delete this, sure enough, there's the serial number. If I type just H, it shows me just the hour. Just M, just the minute. Just an S, we don't have any, so it shows 0. Now, in this case, I want to display a leading 0, so I'm going to type HH and a colon, MM, and now I see 9:57. Now, I want to show either AM or PM, so I do a space AM/PM, and there we go. When I click OK, it displays the leading 0, hours, minutes, and an AM or a PM. If I type 3:00 space PM. By the way, remember, if you don't type in times correctly, that becomes a text value. But as soon as you add that space, it is a time value aligned to the right, and that works. Now, what if you didn't want to show AM, PM, but you wanted military time? No problem. Control-1. I come down to Custom. I highlight this. I simply type HH:MM. And that will give us military time, 3 hours past noon. Click OK. Now, if someone decides to put 3:00 space PM, guess what? It'll enter, but it will display as military time. You can see up in the formula bar, it actually is always going to be stored with the AM or PM, but our number formatting will display it in military time. Now we want to talk about displaying number of decimals. This is similar to clicking these buttons over here. Click in the cell Control-1. I'm going to come down to Custom. And now I'm going to highlight General, type a 0, a decimal, and watch this. If I type 4 zeros. That's as if we clicked the increased decimal 4 times. So in this case, I want to show always the number of pennies. Now, what this 0 says is please show me significant and insignificant digits. So the 4 is significant. The 0, since we don't have a digit there, is considered insignificant. Click OK. Now it displays as 1.40. But remember, now that we have those 2 zeros there, if I were to type in 1.755, this will be displayed as 1.76. Control Z. Now let's see what happens if Control 1, down in custom. There's that 1.35. If I type in 0.0, I'm limiting the number of decimals. Click OK. So even though we see displayed 1.4, up in the formula bar is 1.35. Now the 0 shows significant and insignificant digits. If you only want to show significant digits, you can use the pound sign. So let's try it. Control 1, come down to Custom, and in the Type text box, I type pound sign, period, pound, pound. Now notice I can already see the preview. That pound is there in case I type an extra decimal, but it will not display it if there is nothing there. So when I click OK, 1.4. If I type 1.35, the 35 is displayed. If I type 1.455, again, because I only have 2 pound signs, it's only going to show me 2 significant digits. Control Z. The last custom number formatting we want to look at is percentage. And we will use the zeros. We simply have to add a percentage symbol. Now this is 0.3575. If we format it as a percentage, it's 35.75%. Control 1. Come down to Custom. And in the Type text box, 0.00. And notice that without the percentage symbol, it's just showing how many decimals to display. But as soon as I type that percentage symbol, boom, it slides the decimal over and adds the percentage symbol. Click OK. Similar to our zeros for displaying only a certain number of decimals, Control 1, we can come down to Custom. And in the Type text box, 0.0 and a percentage symbol. And you can already see the result there. Click OK. It is displayed as 35.8, but really 35.75%, and under that is 0.3575. So this is our first glimpse at custom number formatting. Now we have a little bit more power to display the numbers however we want on the surface of the spreadsheet. We saw back over here, remember, the number one idea or concept is number formatting is a facade. Hey, now we want to go over and talk about style formatting. So I'm going to click on the sheet Style Format. Now, style formatting is simply adding things like bold, fill color, font color, borders, and more. Now we have some guidelines for style formatting. Number 1, use the minimum amount to effectively deliver the message. Be consistent. That means if you're going to pick a particular color and font for field names, be consistent and always use that particular style formatting. All numbers should have the same number of digits. That's, again, being consistent. And units must always be indicated with either number formatting or labels. So if it's money, you need to point out it's money. Percentages, use percentages. Now, there's 2 schools of thought for stylistic formatting. Minimalism school, that school says, hey, I'm going to have bold for the field names at the top. But why do you think they have those gray lines? I'm not going to add any extra borders, and I'm going to very rarely use fill or font color or things like that. The more than minimal school says, hey, I'm not just going to add bold. I'm also going to add perhaps font color or fill color, and maybe I'll add black borders. All right, here is the minimal school. I'm going to use the keyboard Control B to add bold, and I am going to add some number formatting. These are counting numbers, so I'm going to highlight all the numbers. Control 1. Here's the Format Cells dialog box. I'm going to choose accounting. and choose to show two decimals with a dollar sign. Now, we didn't talk about accounting number format, but there are a couple things that distinguish it from currency. One is negative numbers show up in parentheses. Zeros show up as dashes. Not only that, but the dollar sign will always be fixed on the left. Now, this doesn't look too minimal to me, so I'm going to highlight the middle numbers and Control 1 and choose to show no dollar sign. Click OK. So I've indicated the unit up here at the top and for the bottom line number. That is an example of minimal. Now let's do less than minimal. I'm going to Control B, come up to font group, and for fill, I'm going to use the fill bucket. I'm going to use dark blue. And then for font color, I'm going to use white. Now I'm going to Control ZZ. There's another way we can do this. When we highlight, we can right-click, and look at that. Up pops the mini toolbar. I can select Fill from here, and then Font Color. The rule for fill and font color is there has to be a big enough value difference. So for example, if I choose red fill with black font, that is not going to print out correctly. If you squint your eyes at this and you can't see a very big difference in value between the font color and the fill, you know the difference in values is not big enough. I'm going to go back to my dark blue and font white. Now I'm going to highlight the whole table using the keyboard Control asterisk. And I'm going to use the asterisk on the number pad. If you're using the normal number pad, you have to do Control Shift 8. I like Control asterisk on the number pad because instantly it will highlight the current table. Now, I'm going to do Control 1 to get to Format Cells. And really, Format Cells dialog box has everything. It has number formatting. It has alignment. It has font, all sorts of things, borders, fill. And I'm going to go back to borders, and I'm going to select outline. That does just the outside. You can see right here it gives us a preview. And then inside, that does all the vertical lines and all the horizontal lines. Click OK. Now I'm going to add some other types of borders. In accounting, oftentimes we have a line, a dark line right there saying, I just did a calculation on the numbers above, because this is a formula adding the total expenses. So I'm going to highlight just the total expense line, Control 1, and on the Borders tab, I'm going to select the border. Then I'm going to select the color. In this case, I'm keeping it automatic. And then I'm going to come over here and notice I want the line on the top, so I'm going to click the very top. Similarly, you could have used that button right there. Click OK. Well, that didn't change. Oh, I have to click off to the side. So there, that dark line in accounting means I just did a calculation on the numbers above. Similarly, down here, there is net income. We did a calculation on the number above. Notice that line doesn't mean adding, because it could be adding in this case, but certainly it could be subtracting, or in cost accounting, there's all sorts of different calculations you can do. I need that dark line at the top, and then I need a double line at the bottom. That double line means this is the bottom line. This is the number I was trying to calculate. Control 1. And now I have two different lines. I'm going to select the line, select the color, and then draw it. I can either click that button or click right on the top. Now I need to go back and get my next border, border, color, and then draw. In this case, I could click that button, or I always like to click and draw it myself. Click OK. Off to the side, and there we go. Now I'm going to highlight all the numbers. Control 1. On the Number tab, I'm going to select Currency. That's the type of negative number. I need to see the dollar sign in two decimals. Click OK. Now the difference between currency and accounting, well, accounting has fixed dollar sign. Zeros are dashes, minuses are parentheses. For currency, we have the choice of how to display our minus. Zeros show up as zeros, and that's called a floating dollar sign. Notice it floats with how wide the number is. Now I'm going to do the same trick on the inside numbers. I don't want it as cluttered. Control 1, and the symbol I'm going to say none. Click OK. Now there's all sorts of different types of style formatting. This is just two examples, a minimal and a less than minimal. Now, I actually had some notes up here. It says minimalism school says and more than minimalism school says. I actually have notes. This is video number 1, and so for every single video there will be notes. And right next to the Excel file that you download, you can download these notes, and they're pretty detailed notes. This is the table of content at the top. If I click on this style formatting, it will jump to that section, and there are the full notes. And so these notes have a lot more detail than the notes you see in the spreadsheet. So be sure and download these, and they correspond pretty exactly to what you see in the videos. All right, we have one last stylistic example. Here's a data set. And right off the bat, we have field names at the top. But notice the column widths aren't wide enough. So I'm going to highlight with my downward pointing black arrow the G and click and drag all the way to I. And I'm going to see what happens if I double click to best fit. Now, sometimes that'll work. Sometimes that won't work. And why didn't it work for this G column? Because best fit will always best fit to the biggest thing in the column. So in this case, I probably want to manually click and drag this. Now, if we want to wrap text, that means have employee and the name on the next line, sales, and amount on the next line. We could actually come up and use the automatic button, wrap text. That's a type of an alignment. Now, notice it didn't do anything. It won't do anything until I change the column width. Now, once I do that, I have to come over and double click between 14 and 15, and instantly now I have wrap text in the same cell. Now, if you would like more control than the wrap text button, meaning perhaps I want product and name on the next line, we can manually set line break or wrap text. I'm going to put my cursor double click right before the P, backspace, and the keyboard to do a manual line break or wrap text is Alt-Enter. Now, when you Alt-Enter, you still have to have wrap text to get it to wrap. If I didn't have this turned on, you could see that wouldn't work. So I'm going to wrap text, and instantly that will work. But the break will always happen after the word boomerang. Let's try the same thing over here. Backspace, Alt-Enter. Right here, backspace, Alt-Enter. Now I'm going to add a little bit of formatting here. And I do want to show you one really cool thing. Let's just format this first cell here. I'm going to do fill, dark blue, font color, white. And then I'm going to click. It just happens to be the right border there. Notice I could select all sorts of different border options, but I'm going to click that button. Now what I want to do is save that. In fact, I'm going to Control B. So now we have fill color, font color, bold, and an outline for the cell. What I'd like to do is save that as a cell style so I can use it later. That took 4 clicks, right? But if I save it as a cell style, I can simply have a single click to apply all 4 formatting elements. So I've formatted the cell. I come up to the Styles group, click the More button, and then down here it says New Cell Style. Now, it automatically picked up everything. If you wanted to do more, you could click here and go through the Format Cells dialog box and do whatever you want. I'm going to click Escape. But what I'd like to do is call this Field Name Blue. And now I can click OK. Now, I'm going to highlight both cells, come up to the drop-down, and notice I have a bunch of them here because it's picking up other times I've done this. But there's the new one that I've selected. That is pretty convenient. And instantly it is applied. All right, so a little bit about stylistic formatting. We'll do lots of stylistic formatting throughout the rest of the class. Now I want to come over, and our last topic is page setup. So here we have an amortization table. Control down arrow, looks like it's 365 rows. Control home jumps up to cell A1. And now I want to look at what this would look like if I didn't do page setup. Control P, and sure enough, there's a preview. I can click through, and there it is. I would like to do things like center this, and I would like to repeat the field names at the top on each page and have page numbers. There are some options here. I'm going to click Escape, but I'm going to come up and go to Page Layout, page setup group, and there's some options here too. There's the dialog launcher. If I click that, it gets me to page setup, but I want to learn the keyboard. Alt PSP. Now, how do you determine portrait and landscape? Well, this is much taller than it is wide, so I'm going to select portrait. You could adjust. Now, for us, we're going to print this on many pages, so I'm not going to use this adjust. But if you had one page and you wanted to blow it up or shrink it down, you could do adjust to. What we want to do is say, hey, fit to. Now, I always want it to fit to one page wide. You can already see there's a dashed line down here. That means it will not fit onto one page. So I definitely want to say one page wide. But I don't know how many pages tall. So the trick is highlight what's ever there and delete it. By deleting it, it will automatically print out as many as there are. If I were to add more rows or delete more rows, it would always know to print out the right number of pages. So one page wide by however many pages tall. Now this was the Page tab. Now let's go over to the Margins tab. We definitely can set top, bottom, left, and right, and even where the headers are. We don't need to do that here, so I'm simply going to check horizontal, and that will automatically center it on the page. Now I want to go over to header and footer. Let's start with the header. There's the preview. There is nothing. There's the drop down for built-in headers. And there's the custom button for custom header. Now we have 3 sections. We're not going to put anything here, so I'm going to click Escape. But for the header, preview, built-in, fully customizable. For the footer, I don't see a preview. Here's the drop-down. I am going to select page 1 of question mark. And page 1 of question mark simply means it'll print out if there's 5 pages, 1 of 5, 2 of 5, etc. If later you have 10 pages, it will say 1 of 10, 2 of 10. And we can see down here in the preview, it's got our built-in footer. Now I want to customize this further, so I'm going to come up to Customize Footer. There's the code for that number of pages. Now we start on the left. If you want to show the date, that's the code to automatically print out today's date. If I do a space, dash, and space, notice I can mix type and stuff with the code from these buttons here. Now, I'm going to click on this button, boop, and it puts in the code for time. So it'll always print out the time that I print this workbook. Now I'm going to come over to the right section. I could put the full file path. I could put the workbook name. I could put the sheet name. Now I'm going to put the sheet name here. Now what's nice about this is it's dynamic. It's linked. If I change this later, this will update. That is a great button if you have, for example, a budget with January, February, March. You do the page setup on the first page, and every time you copy the sheet over, it will automatically pick up whatever sheet name there is. All right, I'm going to click OK. Header and footer, preview, built-in, customize. Now let's go over to the Sheet tab. Print area. This is great if you wanted to exclude some part of the sheet. So for example, if I only wanted to print out this part, everything else would be excluded. Now that is especially useful when you have calculations or notes off to the side which are not part of your final report. Now we don't have a print area. We're going to print everything, so I'm going to delete it. What we want to use is rows to repeat at top. Watch this. I'm going to click right on row header 4. It'll automatically print out those field names at the top of each sheet. You could also do columns if you had a table that was really wide and you wanted to repeat names or company names or categories. You could highlight a particular column. There are some other settings here that you can read through. You can also determine which way if you have many tables to print. That's it for us. All we want is rows to repeat at top. I'm going to click OK. And now when I Control P, look at that. It is centered. I have my footer. When I click Next Page, look at that. It repeats just that row 4. That is quite spectacular. There's our page numbers. All right, I'm going to click Escape. I'm not going to print. Let's just come down here. I'm going to double click and call this amortization table and enter. Now when I Control P, boom, that is totally dynamic and updates. Escape. All right, so that was a pretty epic first video. We talked about page setup. We talked about style formatting. We talked about number formatting as facade. We talked about Excel data types. Here's the list right here. We talked about the amazing Excel table feature. We talked about terminology, Excel proper data set, field names at the top, records and rows, empty cells all the way around. We talked about raw data. We defined some data analysis and business intelligence terms. We talked about keyboards. We talked about the structure of Excel. We talked about the two things Excel does, calculations and data analysis. We talked about our goal in this class, developing effective and efficient solutions in Excel. And we started off the class talking about the version of Excel we're using. This is Professional 2016. All right, last thing. Let's come down to the scroll arrows and right-click to open up the dialog box to navigate through all of our sheets. And we want to scroll down, and I want you to click on the homework sheet and click OK. So at the end of each workbook, there will be homework problems for you to do. You click on the blue one, read the yellow cells, complete the problem. The red ones have the answers, but don't you dare look at them until you've completed. So in this chapter, there's 6 homework problems. All right, now next video, we'll talk about more Excel fundamentals. We'll talk about formulas and functions. All right, we'll see you next video.